does mineral-based sunscreen fall in those two categories you just laid out?
So mineral-based is going to be kind of like mineral makeup, and the idea is to use.
The spotlight can be unforgiving, but even by celebrity standards. What happened to Megyn Kelly is turning heads for all the wrong reasons. Fans, colleagues, and casual viewers alike are doing double takes, struggling to reconcile the Megyn Kelly they once knew with the woman who now appears before them on screens. The transformation is more than subtle. It's jarring, so dramatic that social media erupted almost instantly. Kelly, long celebrated for her poise, confidence, and unmistakable on-air presence, recently underwent a procedure that has left her looking radically different. Some call it rejuvenation. Others call it unrecognizable. Wherever you stand, one thing is clear: the news anchor who commanded political debates and interview segments has changed in ways fans never expected. It didn't take long for viewers to notice. Comments flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as people tried to make sense of the new look. "Is that really her?" one user typed, while another shared a side-by-side comparison that went viral almost immediately. The reaction wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about identity, familiarity, and the deep connection audiences form with public figures over years of daily viewing. But what drove Kelly to make this bold change? Was it personal, professional, or a combination of pressures we can only speculate about? As experts weighed in, discussing everything from aging in the spotlight to the subtle art of cosmetic enhancements, the conversation became as much about society's expectations of women in media as it was about Kelly herself. Now, Megyn Kelly faces a world eager to judge, comment, and dissect every angle of her transformation. But behind the headlines and viral posts, there's a more personal story, one that delves into the pressures, fears, and decisions that led her to a moment that has shocked millions. Megyn Kelly had always been a commanding presence. Whether anchoring primetime news segments or moderating tense political debates, her confidence, intelligence, and poise set her apart. For decades, viewers felt a connection not just to her reporting, but to her persona. That connection is why the reactions to her recent transformation have been so intense. The first time the public saw the results of her surgery, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. But as new photos and appearances circulated, the difference became undeniable. Cheeks were fuller, jawlines sharper, and a certain softness replaced the familiar lines that fans had associated with years of on-air experience. It was not a subtle tweak. It was a full reimagining of her appearance. Social media exploded almost immediately. Fans and critics alike debated the change, with some praising the rejuvenation and others expressing shock or disappointment. Memes and side-by-side comparisons proliferated, framing the transformation in stark, often unflattering contrasts. For many, it was the first time in years that they were unsure if they were looking at the Megyn Kelly they had known, but behind the headlines, the story was more nuanced. Sources close to Kelly explained that the decision came after years of grappling with the pressures of public scrutiny. In a world where women in media are judged not just on performance, but on appearance, the choice to undergo surgery was deeply personal and, in her eyes, necessary. "I wanted to feel like myself again," one insider explained. It wasn't about vanity. It was about reclaiming confidence. The procedure itself was extensive, involving a combination of subtle enhancements designed to preserve recognition, while addressing areas that had begun to show signs of aging. The challenge, Kelly reportedly acknowledged, was to strike a balance between change and familiarity, something that, despite her best efforts, left some fans feeling disoriented. Even colleagues at major networks noticed. Casual mentions in morning meetings, whispers in makeup rooms, and moments on live sets highlighted the shift. Though professional interactions remained respectful and supportive, it was impossible to ignore the reactions that viewers had been broadcasting online. Kelly herself, understanding the scrutiny, prepared to address it head-on. The surgery and its aftermath raised larger questions about the pressures faced by women in high-profile media positions. While male anchors age into their gravitas, women often face criticism for showing any signs of natural aging. Kelly's choice, then, becomes part of a broader conversation about societal expectations, personal agency, and the often unforgiving gaze of the public. As appearances continued, Kelly maintained her signature professionalism, answering questions about her transformation with grace. She acknowledged the change, framed it as part of her personal journey, and reminded audiences that identity goes beyond appearances. Still, the debate raged. For millions of viewers, recognizing the person they admired on screen became a challenge, and the story became less about the procedure itself and more about the public's relationship with the evolving image of someone they had long trusted. By the end of the chapter, it was clear Megyn Kelly had changed. Yes, but she remained herself in ways that went beyond the superficial. Her voice, her perspective, and her unwavering confidence reminded viewers that while appearances can shift, the essence of who someone is can endure, even in the face of shock and scrutiny. The day after Megyn Kelly's first public appearance post-surgery, social media erupted into a frenzy. Within hours, hashtags like #NewMegyn, #unrecognizable, and #MEGYN Kelly transformation were trending across platforms. Fans, journalists, and critics debated endlessly, dissecting every photo, video clip, and televised segment. Some expressed excitement, claiming she looked rejuvenated and radiant. Others expressed disbelief, saying the change was so dramatic they struggled to recognize the familiar anchor they had watched for years. Twitter became a battlefield of opinion. Side-by-side comparisons flooded feeds, highlighting subtle differences in her jawline, cheeks, and eyes. Meme pages took the opportunity to exaggerate the contrast, blending humor with shock, while news outlets ran articles analyzing what her new appearance meant for her brand and public image. Every post, every comment, seemed to fuel the narrative that Megyn Kelly had become someone else entirely. Traditional media was no different. Morning shows debated the transformation with panel discussions, bringing in cosmetic experts and media analysts to weigh in. Headlines ranged from sensational, "Megyn Kelly, who is she now?" to sympathetic, "Why celebrities face pressure to reinvent themselves." Even political commentators, who had once focused solely on her journalistic credibility, found themselves discussing her appearance, illustrating just how inseparable identity and image had become in modern celebrity culture. Fans, meanwhile, were divided. Longtime supporters expressed concern that the surgery might overshadow her professional achievements. "I miss the Megyn I knew," one viewer wrote, while another added, "She's still brilliant, but she looks different." It's hard to process. Younger audiences, who had first discovered her in recent years, were less attached to the old image and more focused on the polished, modern appearance she now presented. The divide in reactions highlighted an uncomfortable truth. In the world of public figures, even minor changes in appearance can trigger major public discourse. Megyn herself remained calm, navigating the storm with practiced poise. In interviews and public statements, she acknowledged the transformation without shying away from it. "Change is part of life," she said in a candid interview. "I wanted to feel confident and like myself again. I understand that it may take some time for people to adjust, but this is my choice, and I own it." Her words, measured and composed, sought to redirect attention from shock to perspective, emphasizing personal empowerment rather than public approval. Behind the scenes, her team worked tirelessly to manage perception. Media training sessions, coordinated appearances, and selective interviews were all designed to control the narrative while giving Kelly space to articulate her own story. Publicists emphasized that the surgery was personal and not an attempt to conform to unrealistic societal expectations, though they were aware that public curiosity and judgment would persist. As the days passed, the public reaction evolved. Shock gave way to debate, debate gave way to curiosity, and curiosity eventually gave way to cautious acceptance. Megyn Kelly remained at the center, not just as asterisk figure of scrutiny, but as someone reclaiming her own narrative. Slowly, viewers began to separate the change in appearance from the woman's intellect, insight, and professionalism. The conversation shifted from "who is she now?" to "what does this say about the pressures women face in media?" By the end of the week, it was clear that Megyn Kelly's transformation had become more than a story about surgery. It was a reflection of broader societal dynamics. It highlighted the intense scrutiny public figures face, the evolving standards of beauty and professionalism, and the delicate balance between personal choice and public expectation. And through it all, Kelly herself remained steady, demonstrating that while the world may focus on appearances, character and capability endure far longer than looks ever could. Weeks after Megyn Kelly's surgery, the initial shock had begun to settle, but the public's fascination had not diminished. News cycles continued to revisit her transformation, often framing it as a lesson in the pressures of celebrity life. Morning shows and late-night programs ran segments analyzing her look, while talk shows debated the psychological and societal factors that drive public figures to alter their appearance. Behind the scenes, Kelly continued to navigate her personal journey carefully. She maintained her rigorous on-air schedule while investing time in her own well-being. Personal trainers, stylists, and counselors all became part of a holistic approach to managing the public spotlight. Alongside her personal health, the process wasn't about vanity, it was about feeling confident, staying resilient, and ensuring that she presented herself authentically in every public appearance. The media, which had initially focused heavily on her looks, gradually began to shift coverage toward her professional achievements and commentary. Analysts and journalists increasingly highlighted her interviews, her political insights, and her capacity to navigate complex topics with clarity. The transformation, once the primary story, became a contextual note rather than the central narrative. Slowly, audiences remembered why they had followed her career in the first place. Yet, the long-term effects were undeniable. Megyn Kelly's surgery sparked conversations across the industry about women in media, the demands of public perception, and the societal obsession with youth and beauty. Colleagues in broadcasting began to openly discuss the subtle pressures they faced, and media outlets explored initiatives to better support on-air talent and balancing appearance and credibility. The conversation Kelly unwittingly ignited extended far beyond her personal experience, touching on systemic issues within the industry itself. For Kelly, the journey was both personal and public. While she had faced scrutiny, she also emerged as a figure who could spark meaningful dialogue about identity, self-confidence, and resilience. The public's perception, once sharply focused on her outward appearance, gradually broadened to appreciate her depth, professionalism, and authenticity. Even as new headlines occasionally resurfaced, the narrative had begun to shift from shock to respect, underscoring the enduring reality. Transformation does not erase talent, character, or influence. By the end of this phase, Megyn Kelly had achieved something subtle yet profound. She had reclaimed control over her own image, navigated intense public scrutiny, and used her experience to illuminate the pressures faced by women in media. The world may have noticed a changed face, but what remained unchanged and ultimately enduring was her voice, her intellect, and her place in the industry she had shaped for decades. Months after Megyn Kelly's surgery, the immediate shock had faded, but the long-term impact of her transformation continued to unfold. The headlines that once questioned her identity gradually gave way to discussions about her resilience, professionalism, and ability to navigate the relentless pressures of the media world. Kelly's journey had become a case study in balancing personal choice with public perception, a lesson for celebrities, professionals, and everyday individuals alike. Professionally, Kelly remained a force to be reckoned with. Her commentary on political events, interviews with high-profile figures, and presence on news panels were as sharp and compelling as ever. While some skeptics initially questioned whether her new appearance would affect her credibility, it soon became clear that her intellect, insight, and communication skills were untouched. In fact, her renewed confidence seemed to enhance her on-screen presence, allowing her to engage audiences with even greater authority. The public, too, had largely acclimated. Social media conversations shifted from shock to respect. Fans shared stories about how her openness regarding her transformation inspired them to embrace changes in their own lives, whether physical, professional, or personal. Kelly's experience became symbolic of the courage it takes to make difficult decisions in the public eye, reminding audiences that vulnerability and self-determination are strengths, not weaknesses. In the media industry, her transformation sparked wider discussions about the pressures faced by women on screen. Colleagues noted that Kelly's choice and her ability to navigate public scrutiny with grace set an example for others facing similar pressures. Newsrooms began to address issues such as ageism, appearance-based biases, and the intense scrutiny of female anchors, fostering a more nuanced conversation about the human experience behind public personas. Kelly herself reflected on the journey as both a personal and professional evolution. She acknowledged that undergoing surgery in the public eye is never simple, but she emphasized that the decision was deeply personal. Interviews revealed a woman who had learned to balance self-care with professional responsibility, someone who could face judgment without letting it define her. Her story became less about the physical change and more about empowerment, resilience, and reclaiming agency in a world that often expects women to compromise themselves for public approval. Even as she embraced her renewed image, Kelly remained keenly aware of the societal pressures surrounding beauty and aging. She used her platform to highlight the challenges women face, advocating for authenticity, self-confidence, and acceptance of change at every stage of life. By framing her experience as part of a larger conversation about identity, media scrutiny, and personal choice, she transformed public curiosity into dialogue with substance. By the end of the year, the narrative surrounding Megyn Kelly had shifted dramatically. No longer was she defined solely by her appearance or the shock of her transformation. Instead, she was recognized for her expertise, her resilience, and the courage to make choices on her own terms. The story of her surgery, once sensationalized, had evolved into an inspiring example of personal empowerment in the face of societal expectations. In the quiet moments, away from cameras and headlines, Kelly's journey continued to resonate. She had faced judgment, curiosity, and speculation, yet she emerged with her confidence intact and her professional integrity unwavering. The transformation that once startled millions had ultimately reaffirmed a fundamental truth. Identity, talent, and character endure far beyond appearances. Megyn Kelly had changed, yes, but in doing so, she had reminded the world that the essence of who a person is cannot be altered by public opinion.